All right, thank you for that. We'll talk about those in a little bit. So, video game characters in general have changed over time, of course. So, I mean, we started out, I think the very first video game character wasn't actually a character. The game was on an oscilloscope in like 1947, and then we got to Pong. There's no character, right? It's just like a little ball. But as games evolved, we got characters inside of our games, and the first ones were all male. So you had Pac-Man, you had Frogger. He could actually, in one of the iterations, he could carry a female frog on his back to rescue her, but there wasn't any sort of playable female characters. Miss Pac-Man was the first one, and I remember when I found out there was a Mrs. Pac-Man, not just a Pac-Man. It was pretty exciting as a female that there was a female character that you could play, and character being, of course, a circle with a little mouth that you could tell us, but that's all we had back then. Then the next character I remember that was a female character was Donkey Kong. And I was staying with some relatives, and they had a cabinet shop, and in the back of the cabinet shop, they had some arcade games that they'd gotten from like a restaurant that had gone out of business. And that's where I first encountered Donkey Kong. And it was a fun game, and I really liked it, but I was super, super irritated that all she did was say, "Help, come and rescue me," that the only female character in the game did nothing. Help them, for goodness sake, do something. And I remember it being very frustrating to me as a female that the only female character I did not identify with at all. The next female character I remember is Street Fighter, Chun-Li and Cammy. Cammy was my favorite. And it was really awesome to be able to play a strong female character. They didn't have any drawbacks. I mean, they were just as good as the male characters in the game. You could easily beat male characters. And so that was pretty exciting to have, although there was only a couple of them to choose from, and there were a lot of male characters to choose from. Still, though, kind of in this time, we definitely see a difference between the number of female characters as options and the role that female characters play in video games, but it actually gets worse kind of in the 90s. Of course, they're also, please notice their outfits, they're kind of pixelated, but if you're about to go and fight, I'm not really sure these are the best outfits to choose, practical standpoint. But for me, I didn't play video games for quite a while, and the next character that I remember encountering that really made me think again about how females are portrayed in video games was Alice. So this game came out in about 2000, and I found this game to be extraordinary. It was the first time I really kind of found a sort of female character. She was the main character, the only character that you could play as the main character. And the story is really all about her. And her battle is her own mind. She's sort of overcoming a mental illness. It's kind of a take on Alice in Wonderland. Wonderland is really just her own imagination. And her imagination goes very, very dark after her family is killed in a fire that could potentially have been her fault. And she has to kind of fight her way through her own insanity. I had a relative at the time dealing with mental illness. So it was very impactful for me from two different standpoints. One being that this was a very, it was an early kind of portrayal of mental illness and how this is something we really need to deal with. It's not something to be kind of handed away. But then also from the other perspective that this was a female character that had a very interesting story, and she was the focus. And I hadn't really thought about it before, but I loved video games when I was younger. I could play Pac-Man and Frogger and Mrs. Pac-Man. But in the 90s, kind of back, maybe a little bit after Street Fighter, there just weren't very good representations of females in video games. And I just wasn't that interested in playing them. After Alice, I remember seeing this game. I didn't play it. But I remember actually, I don't know if any of you guys remember this game or know anything about it, probably early 2000s, but I used to go, we had a GameStop near our apartment when I lived in California, and this was always up on this bigger screen that they had that you could play this bizarre game with these characters. It was a dancing game, and they were clearly trying to market it to females because they kind of had some things in that area that kind of made that area look more female friendly and stuff. And so they were clearly trying to like, hey look, women, here's like a video game for you. It had a bizarre storyline. It was like a dancing game of some sort that you had to make them do these dance-offs. And the characters are clearly, I mean, just not, I don't know, I remember being struck by it and thinking, wow, this is what they're marketing to females. And I never saw anyone really playing the game, like ever. So it was there, and it was, and I mean, some people do remember her character from the time she made really weird noises, and it was like weird music, and so, but I remember seeing that around that time, and kind of being struck by, you know, this is what we're marketing for women, trying to get more women into video games, kind of around that time where you could see a lot of difference in how male and female video game characters were portrayed. This is also around the time of Lara Croft, who's a mixed character. On the one hand, she's amazing. She's super educated, she's strong, she has like an amazing storyline, but you know, at the last minute, they decided to make her look like this, which is not physically possible. And so on the one hand, as a female, I remember being really excited. She's a strong protagonist. The story is really about her, but why does she have to look like this? Nobody looks like this. And even if you look like this, you know, you're going to dress like this to go and dig I know archaeologists, they don't dress like this, so, at all. So this is kind of really at this peak where I think the video game industry was trying to make more strong female characters, but this is a problem. This is really not good. I'm a big RPG fan, so I also remember playing Baldur's Gate and Champions of Nora, and it was really awesome that you had female character options that you could choose that did not have any, you know, it was similar to the males in terms of they had powers and they were just as good and they could fight and they could play the main storyline with them again. Again, looking at how they're dressed. On the left, she's a little bit better, but I mean, on the right, really, you know, you're off adventuring, and that's the stuff you're going to stay on, you know? And so it's just, I loved these games, that I played these games, but I can remember thinking, you know, really, can I have a different outfit? It's just a little bit more practical. Dark Alliance 2 was another really good one. And it was always the case, though, again, that you have more male character options, or in some of these, it would almost be the same character, but you could choose the female version versus the male version of the exact same race, class, and those kind of things. We got good characters like Buffy. So this show comes out, and she's this really great, super strong female character that really explored kind of her vulnerabilities. And I remember at the same time, this show was out, and I played her video game, Blood Rain came out, and I was so excited about it. She's going to be like, you know, similar to Buffy, right? She's going to be this strong female character. It's going to be a great, interesting story. That video game is boring. There's hardly any storyline. It's really just her in her cute little outfits, running around, you know, killing vampires and stuff. And it just really was very disappointing that you get these kind of rich, at this time you're getting rich, cool, amazing storylines, Prince of Persia, with male protagonists, but we're not getting those complex storylines with the female protagonist. She's just pretty in a cute outfit. So I'm terribly disappointed. We are getting better. The Left 4 Dead series, again, your female protagonists have interesting characters, and they say just as kind of interesting things as the male characters do, and so that's pretty neat. I love these games a lot. But again, why is only one of the survivors a female versus the 3? If this is going to be the case, then y'all are in trouble. If only 25% of the surviving population is female, let's just hope it's more like half and half. So again, that's kind of disappointing. A really good portrayal recently is the Borderlands series. It has excellent, amazing female characters. You know, I love the Siren characters. Lilith is awesome. Who doesn't love Tiny Tina? I think they've done a really good job, especially they're showing different body types. Again, they're probably a little more, scantily clad than they could have been, but I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, and this is a game I really enjoyed playing, and I really enjoyed all their female characters. So why does all of this matter? 40% of video game players today are women, and that's an increase. It was a lot more kind of in the early days of Pac-Man and Frogger when video games first came out. We weren't saying, video games are for boys and not for girls. But as we progressed, that started to be what happened. There started being video games really marketed towards males. Girls weren't supposed to play video games. When we got video games, they were like Barbie goes to the fashion show or something awful like that. And then that progressed until what we get is a lot of video games that girls don't want to play. But when you have games that women want to play, they play just as much as males do. And right now we're at about 40% of video game players are women. What they're mostly playing though is what you would call like the casual games and those sorts of things. And but is this because they're not interested? The research says no. It's that there's not games that they see themselves in, that they're interested in playing because they're strong, interesting female characters with the kinds of storylines that females would be interested in seeing. In 2015, only 9% of games featured exclusively playable female protagonists versus 32% offering exclusively male protagonists. So is it any wonder that more males are playing video games? There was 46% allowed choice, but again, like with Left 4 Dead, you'd have fewer female options. There might be 3 or 4 male options and 1 or 2 female options, so that continues to be the trend. And what the impact this has is that from psychology, identity theory says that part of a person's self-concept comes from the groups to which that person belongs. And as being a member of the group male or a member of the group female, we like to read books and see shows and play video games that feature characters we can relate with, and we can really see ourselves in that character. So when you don't have those strong female realistic characters, you're just not going to appeal to female gamers because they can't really see themselves in the character. And it's not that women never want to play male characters or male characters never want to play female characters, but when they study it and scientists bring a bunch of people into the lab and they see what people prefer, females tend to want to play female characters and males tend to want to play male characters. And so you've got a lot of male options. That's why video games appeal more to males. You don't have the richness and the breadth of female character choices for women who would like to play video games. Some other important research findings, going back to the scantily cladness of the female characters, they found that even if you have a good, interesting, strong character like Lara Croft, dressing her like that, making her look like that, makes women not want to play her. It's treating women as an object instead of as a person, and who wants to see themselves as an object? Objectification is linked to harmful cognitive outcomes in women. It's also linked to harmful ways that men think of women, especially when they're growing up and they're kind of forming their ideation of what women are in relation to themselves. If they think of women as objects, they're going to have a difficult time in relationships with women because women don't want to be treated like objects. Sexualization of primary female characters luckily has decreased in recent years, but it hasn't decreased in what we call the secondary female characters, and females are more likely to be secondary characters. So those non-playable female characters still tend to show up wearing next to nothing, out of proportion bodies, and unrealistically, in a way that is going to be difficult for females who want to play the game, and it's also problematic for males who are playing the game as well. Which leads me to the characters you guys picked. And interestingly, So close to what, not too much off the research. So we had 6 responses, and half of them are playable characters, and half of them are not. And that's one of the things the research shows is that females are more likely to be those secondary characters, which are not the most important characters in the game. So we're saying already women aren't as important as the males in the game. So the ones chosen as the secondary characters, they're not playable in the main storyline. Liara Stoney, what game is that from?
Mass Effect trilogy.
Mass Effect trilogy?
Liara Stoney.
Okay, Liara Stoney. And she's smart, drives the exposition in the original trilogy. Asari and Jura are cool. So I'm glad, you know, that it looks like that they're a kind of multi-dimensional secondary character. So that's kind of a positive thing, I would think. Two people chose GLaDOS, who, I don't know if I'm saying that right. GLaDOS. But that's who I have in this. And I've never played this game, but now I want to just for reading about it. But it's actually an AI who's based on a real woman that you find out later on. But it's fascinating, the whole character and the evolution of the character and those kinds of things. So I would say that's an interesting portrayal and definitely a step in the right direction in terms of how we're going to portray women in video games. For the playable characters, let's see. Ellie from The Last of Us is very cool. Awesome game. And then I don't actually know these two.
Evie Fry, this is from Assassin's Creed Alloys from Horizon Zero Dawn.
Awesome. So are these like their own storyline, or is it someone you can choose versus a male character?
I was going to talk about this.
Oh, awesome. All right. Just you. That works out really well. We didn't plan that. So that is what I have to say. And so next Rob's going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll take any questions or comments. And we'd really like to hear from you guys too, your experience with female video games characters.
All right. What drew me to this topic was, you remember from Assassin's Creed Syndicate came out, Halo 5. Anyone remember that year? Okay. So, working for GameStop has its perks, right? So I'm there. One of the things we could do was take quizzes, you know, to either get free stuff or get stuff with games. One of them was, I'm a hardcore Assassin's Creed guy myself, so I had to take the Syndicate quiz, you know. One of the things was, how many Assassin's Creed players? One, I guess. It was wrong. EBD. So I looked it up. 2. What drew me to that one was we had a female you could play as. The last time you could play as a female in that one was Assassin's Creed Liberations, but that female was not too drawn out of character, and the game was too short play, so you really didn't have time to enjoy that female character. So, on a first guy Assassin's Creed Syndicate, I immediately jumped in and said, Evie Fry is my girl. I got it. She's the most badass assassin you can play in this game. Not only that, but she got her own download content for the Jack Ripper. So this, you can go kick butt, make people scared, and everything. These two characters, these two voice actresses are pretty well known. Victoria Acton and Laura Bailey. Laura Bailey actually has done work with Bob Carter. Ask him about that. That's a pretty cool story. Polygon wrote an article about these two saying how they're more of a dominant character based, that you have more to do with them and they take more of a role. Laura Bailey's character, I haven't played Halo 5 much, but from what I was reading on the story, she is more of the lead of an entire squad. So she takes charge. She goes in there, you know, Nathan Fillion's in the game too, but she outshadows him. So Evie Fry, big time ally. Any Horizon Zero Dawn players in here? Only one. Okay. So, Alloy is a perfect example of a strong female lead. I've seen gameplay, I haven't played myself, but I've seen my dad play. So, don't mean to call you out. But from seeing it, you know, she is an outcast, and then from there, she just takes on the role and says, I'm going to be the best. going through all this, and so she becomes the main character of the story very quickly. So it's really well written. This took my research a bit to the point that I went back in history and I saw Lara Croft. We've come a long way from the looks of that to the current day. They're more modest and more. Yeah, you have Street Fighter right now. That's still kind of, but not like that. But as you see, when you have a playable female character, you're more closer to being able to play with them. Yeah, in Syndicate, you can swap between Jacob and Evie. But there were some missions where you had to play as Jacob, but every time was an option, I would choose Evie. What made them unique is that there were twins trying to defend London, and the fact that they had two different ways of seeing things. Evie was more like, okay, Jacob, let's stay back, let's not get in trouble. She was more passive. Jacob, like, let's start a gang, let's go do this, let's do this. No. And then you see the two different paths going separately until they have to work together. And that is noticeable in their fighting skills and attributes and their defendants that have it. You notice that Evie's more stealth, and when you're doing stealth missions, you can crouch and not get caught. And if you mess up, it's easier to get away from bad guys. One game that I played recently, really old, any Mummy fans from Brandon Frankenheim? Okay. I played the first Mummy because ultimately I'm running a PS2 and then I let the Mummy returns. So I'm like, okay, I gotta play this in order. That is the first game that I've seen from the 90s that does not have a sexual female. Evie O'Connell they took from the movie what she wore and put it in the game. Yeah, it was very pixelated and I put it in a high def TV, so it was kind of cheesy in the sense. But it was the first time for an anime game I did not see a sexualized female like O'Connell. If you look at the new Lara Croft games, you notice that who's played Rise of the Tomb Raider? Or the first one? Okay. So the first one, she's a survivor, trying to get through, what makes her the Tomb Raider. We don't see her as much as we did in the 90s, that kind of way. We see her, as a survivor type. In Rise of the Tomb Raider, you see her more in her more warmed up outfits because it's a snowy area. So you see her more modest. As you get through the game, yeah, it gets warmer and everything because they're story plot. I'm not saying anything about that right there. She does slowly but surely stays modest. So Tomb Raider has come a long way, as we saw in the picture early on, thanks to Hillary. Assassin's Creed has come a long way because if you go back to just about anyone played an Assassin's Creed game at all. Okay, Assassin's Creed 2, we're there during the Renaissance, thank you. Ezio is your romantic assassin, falls in love, right? They don't treat the females as leads until Brotherhood, but they're not even playable until much later, because the sister becomes an assassin herself. When I see that scene happen in the game, I'm like, later, please? And then they threw Evie Fry, and then the one from Liberations. So hopefully we get more playable female characters as we go. Who's looking for Last of Us 2? Yeah, Last of Us 2. Could possibly be another one you could play as a female. Horizon Zero Dawn has a expansion coming out on the 2, and Alloy is back. And from what I was reading, there's the person that played Evie Fry is actually in it. So there's more than one female in the DLC as opposed to the game where you have a single one. Kingdom Hearts, you got a female in there, which I bet you a lot of people would say, I want to play that person. I do, because going through that, I'm like, yeah, she's very cool, very bubbly. This is what makes the game. So, that's what I gotta say. Q&A.
One female character y'all forgot to mention that was playable was important to as well, Michelle.
Oh,
She was there the whole time.
the There's a lot of others too. I really just chose out the ones that kind of struck me, just ones that I played or that I've seen. And there are some really good ones. It's just when you look at the percentages, it's pretty low. And I think the idea that women don't want to play video games, I mean, really, if you don't find the game interesting because you can't really see yourself in it, it's not really, I mean, you're not going to play it. The more we have interesting female characters and storylines that appeal to females, you see them pick up the games. I mean, just like movies, you know, I mean, when you have, I mean, the movies that do the same thing to women, objectify them, put them into secondary characters, don't really let them have a voice, those aren't appealing to females either. So it's going to be the same with video games. Instead, they're half the population, they're half the people that can buy your game, appreciate your game, enjoy your game. You know, that's a lot of people to leave out. So.
I tend to have a bit of a different experience with female characters in games because, well, I mostly play JRPGs and stuff like that, and especially, like, one of my favorite series is Tales of, and the Tales of series, almost every time the party will have every game actually, there's a female character in the party, usually oftentimes serving a healing role, but in more recent ones, like Tales of Xillia back, what was that, 2011, had a female character as one of the two main characters you can actually play as her. Well, it's kind of hard to explain, but she was a swordsman, mainly like a magic swordsman, spell sword type character, going through a journey of, well, she thought she was a summoned spirit, but as it goes with her, like, godlike, it's complicated, but she finds out she's not. She goes through a lovely journey. It's a very interesting character development. In other games, they have female characters in them that they are side, yes, they're part of a larger group, but they go through much, like, very, very heavy development as the story progresses. Tales of the Abyss, for example, 2006, PS2 era, around the same time as those, had Natalia, who's a hey, that's a long name, in it. A nice character used, princess, discovers that she's not royalty, actually, but due to her kindness during her time that she was actually in the position of authority as a princess, she was a very very for the people type of person. She helped the people so much, and when the time came when they finally found out that she wasn't royal blood and she was going to be executed, the very people of that kingdom rebelled, caused a temporary uprising, and allowed her to escape. And it goes on to that development, and she comes to terms with her.
You actually bring up a great point because the research has found that RPGs do the best job with female characters and have for the longest time. And of course, the worst genre is fighting games, which Street Fighter is still not. But yeah, RPGs have been the best just throughout time for female characters.
Because you have to develop a party to keep it interesting, and
yes.
if you don't character development in such a long game, it's going to be boring if everyone stays the same.
Exactly, and all male parties are not very interesting. I've played D&D before where if I'm the only female player, some of the other males often choose to play female characters because it's more interesting. You can do more interesting storylines and those kinds of things. So yeah, that's a very good point. RPGs have been much better for females than other genres.
Sorry if I was getting a bit ranty there.
No, that's all right. No, it's exciting for me to hear that, like, I mean, not only did you notice the female characters, but you were really impacted by their storylines and those kind of things. That's really exciting.
This is more of a question. Do you think the role of females in video games, like how it's progressing, is kind of similar to like the way females progress in movies? How it started like more of a damsel in distress to become more of a main player. Like, my favorite movies, like Quentin Tarantino, for example, he always does have very strong female characters in his movies. So maybe we need somebody to play like that in video games who has to push more strong female characters.
Absolutely, and you're right. Movies is another place where, you know, women are often relegated to be the damsel in distress in action movies. You know, we get to be all we want in the romantic movies, which I am not a fan of at all and never have been. So where are my movies? Mine are action movies and those kind of things. And I loved Kill Bill because she is such a strong female character. I mean, that could have been a male character. She gets great lines. She gets, you know, just a really neat, and it's kind of a parody. It's funny. It's not really meant to be taken seriously, but I do like Tarantino's female characters. he has a tendency to have a lot of respect for female characters, even when they're playing, you know, the girlfriend of a drug dealer, like in Pulp Fiction and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm all for, I mean, I really feel like the creators of Borderlands put a lot of thought and heart into those female characters. Tiny Teen is awesome, Pete is totally my favorite. You know, and really giving them a voice and giving them more complexity and stuff. But in movies, I mean, there's all this think about Wonder Woman. She's the first female Marvel hero to get her own movie. I mean, really, again, half the population. I mean, you know, there are interesting ways to make female superheroes and have them out there doing cool stuff, not just falling in love and getting married and those kind of things. So, yes, I agree.
Anyone play Fire Emblem in here?
Yes, actually.
I was Fire Emblem.
Yes.
That's one game, not sure which one it was, but you have a Marth who is a strong male, can either, something can happen that can impact history and you can turn to Lucina.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
Well, Lucina, I remember, I never played Awakening, but in her story she disguises as, she pretends to be Marth, or reincarnation of him. And I remember something else that's funny. In Fates, if you side with, depending on the path you pick, you might get Effie, who is a female knight, who is the embodiment of the strength is everything type character, to a point where she has an 80% chance when leveling up to get an increase in the strength stat, which affects attacks and all that. And she has a trait where if her strength stat is 3 more than the opponent, it gets a ridiculous damage boost on her attacks. And her battle cries are everything. She's a typical soldier. She's the type to cover her allies. She's trained her whole life to protect people, basically. And she's like the embodiment of a role that would typically be assigned to a male character, but it's a woman who does this. It's the tale of someone who ascended from, you know, being in poverty, just to, you know, in the slums and all, ascending to knighthood. But
And then Corn's another one that is.
yeah, it's optional. It can go either way with that.
Yeah, that one's the other way, and they represent it. And I know Smash Bros. Is a fighting game, but you can either play as either gender of Corn.
Who's the protagonist?
And then games like Destiny or Diablo, you pick your character and you can shoot male people. But that's, you know, that's up to you what you do with it in the end. But that's just a perfect example that you can custom. Destiny can customize the facial stuff and everything. And then Diablo, well, you just choose the armor, essentially.
Anyone else have a question?
Do you have any theories as to why you think, particularly in the 90s, there was this over-sexualization of women in video games?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that most of the people developing games were men. So, I mean, I think about 3% of the industry at that time were females. So it was mostly men creating video games. So they're creating it from their perspective. And interestingly enough, though, I mean, they researched and they found that having these scantily clad women did not increase the sale of the games and did not increase the reception of the games, and male players were saying, like, I think you just put her in some clothes, you know? I mean, they kind of felt a lot of it was gratuitous. So even their marketing and even their market wasn't all necessarily excited about, you know, every woman in the game wearing next to nothing. So, but I think as more women went into the field and it's sort of changing, younger men seem to be a little better than the ones creating games in the 90s, thank you guys. And that seems to kind of be changing it naturally. But that was sort of the computer industry at that time in the 90s. A particular group of men in that time, they really pushed females out of the industry. And there was a lot of kind of marketing at that time from the main computer companies, marketing specifically to boys, which was further giving the message that technology is not for girls. And in countries where they did not do that, you can go now to a computer science class and it will be half females and half males. Come to a computer science class in the US and many Western countries, you're going to see about 20% females. And a lot of that is marketing. Really, you as a kid, you decide what you're interested in. You know, part of that comes from what you see as being for you. You know, that's why it's important to have minority role models, because you kind of look at whether it's women in technology or whether it's, you know, underrepresented groups. when you see people in those roles that look like you, that you can identify with, you see that as a role that is a possibility for you. When you don't see anyone in that role that you can identify with, you just assume as a child, well, that's not for me. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but that was a big part of it.
I had a comment, I just recently, actually this week, I think it was, saw the new Jumanji trailer, that's coming out in December. And this, if you know what Jumanji, you're sucked into a game. In this case, it's a video game. And they actually make the case that one of the female characters being just in very short pants and a very short thing. And the character in the thing, he said, how come I'm dressed like this? And that's it. Just addressing exactly the thing that you see on the game. So you're going to Bottom in a bikini. That kind of thing. But they addressed that. But it was interesting also that the people out there and the internet, they saw some pictures. This was last year. Of the character like that, they already started saying that should not be or whatever. But in the trailer itself, she's already questioning why am I like this. It's addressing precisely that the video game portrayal is like that. When all the other characters, male characters, are all dressed for jungle, and she is in a short shorts with just a little bit of if it can be called about. But it's addressing precisely this issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Baldur's Gate, Champions of Norrath, some of the characters, the men are in, armor, because you're going out to battle, you need to be in armor, and the girls are like only in armor in special areas, and the rest you're just bare skin. Who goes to fight like that? I mean, that's, and the one picture I put up, I mean, she's completely bare, right over her heart. That's, well, no one does that. I mean, in real life, if there were, female fighters, which there probably was not many at that time, but if they had been allowed, they would have been dressed appropriately for battle. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Well, okay, so is there a game that's just too fantasized for females in a sense? Like God of War is kind of a game makes guys who just want to do everything. For me, that's a real disconnect because it's just too overbearing. It's what everything encompasses, and I don't particularly like that. So is there anything like that for a female game that you've seen before?
No, not really, but I read a lot about those kinds of games, and if there's a game and they really want to market it to those kinds of guys, we're going to market it to manly, masculinity, whatever, that want, all the female fighters to be in bikinis and whatever. I mean, if you have the market for that, that's great, but that's not going to help females, and a lot of men don't want to play that either. And, I don't know, you kind of have to think about what kind of message you're sending like that. I mean, I feel like, we've come a long way in getting equality for women, which is good for men too. Men don't have to always be the protector and the fighter and you can't show any emotions, you can't be a person, the gender roles, the stereotypical gender roles were not just damaging for women, and damaging for men too. And so I think the more that we can do to kind of get it to where people are just allowed to be what they want, and some men will be competitive, kind of, I want to play football, guys, and that's great, but if you're not that kind of guy, you shouldn't have to be that way. And then for girls, there's going to be girls who want to stay home and cook and take care of kids because it's fun, There's going to be other girls that want to go out and start companies and join the military and have access to those kind of things too. And so I think the more we recognize that there's a spectrum, and I think what those kind of games do that are so masculinized, are so even feminized, and go sort of the other way, it's just kind of damaging to everyone, So I mean, I think we want to be in a world where if a guy wants to stay home and take care of the kids and cook the food, he's not going to be made fun of, you know? And where if a woman wants to join a combat unit in the military, you know, if she can handle it, if she can do the work, then it's open to her. So I think that's kind of the danger of those. But on the other hand, I mean, if that's a minority of things, then, you know, I don't know. There's room for everything out there, right? But I don't know, I kind of imagine what would be kind of a really feminized game where you can be offensive towards the other direction, you know, where men are turned into, I kind of think that a lot of romance movies are really offensive to men. It's like you have to be this perfect guy and that he's perfect and remember the dishes and the, you know, I mean, it's that kind of a thing too, again, where you're idealizing a whole group of people that this is what you're expected to be. It's just kind of, yeah, you know. So I don't know if that answered your question. Okay.
I remember our anniversary, so.
But see, you make this high standard that other men can't live
I
up
know, they all
to. So.
There is one game that kind of comes close to God of War with a female. Heavily Sword. Anyone?
Not heard of it.
Yeah, that is strong female lead, sword going kind of kick butt. I've seen gameplay, so that's kind of near what you're looking for. Unfortunately, it's a PS3 exclusive, just like,
So like I never played it. Like if I ever get a PlayStation, I heard that game's like really recommended. I was looking at it, I was like, that's one of the games I want to play. So.
It's cold. Everybody's shivering. I get my jacket.
There is one more game that could possibly count as an extreme power fantasy type of, you know, I think Bayonetta might fall into that category, as it was designed by
I read about that.
Yeah, it's a very extreme game, but it was designed as like a sexual power fantasy for women, apparently.
Wow.
But it's a very, very crazy, extreme type of game. I think that would probably fall into that category of so over the top to the point where it disgusts quite a few people. Yeah.
Ellie, what's your take on the Samus reveal at the end of the Metroid game?
I haven't played that.
Well,
Describe what happens.
so this is a old Nintendo game. You find out at the very end.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
What's your take on that?
Okay, so I read about that and I haven't played it, and that is fascinating because there's a lot of different ways you can take that. So if you don't know, the game is called Metroid, and it's an older game, you play throughout the whole game, you do all these exciting, amazing things, and in the end, your character takes its helmet off and it turns out it was a female. So, should we be surprised? I mean, the fact that it was put in there for shock value, that it was going to be surprising, I think really illuminates well the whole issue. You know, it would be nice where you kind of get to the point where that's not surprising, that you could go and do heroic things and be a female. It's like, okay, you know, and I would like to see now kids who don't know the story play that game and see how they react compared to the original players. I think that would be fascinating. So. Anything else? I hope all you game creators out there, you know, just think about that when you're creating games, just the interesting, cool stuff you can do with realistic, complex female characters. So remembering that we're all on a spectrum, you know, females and males, we're all just, you know, we're not the same.
Just a comment, I think you just nailed it. The issue is that making male characters seem so easy because they're so simple. But female is complex.
The males should have, I guess, the opportunity to be just as complex. And females should have the opportunity to be just as simple.
Maybe we should improve and male. Well, it'll make you a bit more intelligent and complex, really deep. Now these guys are, what smosh, no, wrong.
Exactly.
Not back for about one step at a time, we're not asking for miracles here.
Yeah. I was reading.
Well, thank you guys very much for coming.
Thank you.